You're such an asshole.
Gather around, little kids. Uncle Cappy's going to tell you the story of economics. We'll give you an economics lesson. We're going to tell you how an economy grows. And then, because you don't besmirch this young man. He asked kind of a different question, although he wanted to know how the economy grew. But then he also asked the question, well, how does trade work? And that's essentially what he's asking. So, and this is a good question because he said, well, how does the economy grow? We work harder and smarter. Yeah, but it's kind of good to know it more on a fundamental philosophical level, because then you understand economics a lot better. You don't have to read it. You're just like, yeah, that's how it works. And then you could derive and deduce logical conclusions. Your understanding of economics will be more comprehensive if you understand it at the atomic level and how it works and how society advances, rather than we just, like, you know, what's his name, Mike Norman, and who's the other dipshit, the Australian, Steve Keen. We just print off more money. Ah, money is production. You can eat it. It flies you places. So, all right. Hi, Aaron. This is a video request. How does an economy grow? I don't get it. If GDP grows, then from my understanding, the dollar value of goods and services sold and produces increases, meaning shit gets sold. Machines, cars, TVs, financial services. Well, okay, good. So you understand. This is the key understanding. The Keynesians still don't, doctorates still don't understand this. Money is merely the metric or unit of measurement by which we measure actual production. As you know, but Keynesians don't, you can't actually eat money. The dollar bills don't drive you from here to here. It is the goods and services that are produced within an economy, GDP. That is what, and I like to define GDP as all the things produced within the border that maintains and enhances our lives. So you have to eat food, clothing, shelter that maintains your lives, and then whores, video games, movies, and chocolate enhances your life. Some people would say books or something like that, but I prefer whores and video games. So you do have that understanding that it is not the dollar or currency amount, it is the stuff by which we measure it in whatever currency, yen, dollars, and you have to adjust for inflation, so you have real GDP, so you got that. And he continues on, but who's paying? Say it's another country. Doesn't Poland get poorer by buying machines from Germany? Isn't it always the same amount of wealth around and gets shifted left and right? In other words, isn't one country's growth another country's decline? How can the world economy grow with everybody getting wealthier? Well, let's stop right here, and then I'm going to go through more details, but let's point out a flaw in your thinking. Is one country's growth at another declines? No. If the United States grows at 5, that doesn't prevent Mexico or China or any other country from growing at a higher rate. Now, trade, which I'll explain later, you could say, okay, we took some money, our resources, and we bought stuff. Well, that money could have gone to invest in it. So in that kind of sense, but it is not, one country's growth is not mutually exclusive to another country's growth. If anything, one country's growth helps others, because it's like, well, we need tools from China, we need supplies from Brazil, and so when you start, one economy grows, it helps out other economies that export to that country. So it is not a what is it, Pareto? No, it's what is the Italian name? Pareto is the 80-20 rule. It's not a zero-sum game, is what you're pointing out. How can the world economy grow with everybody getting wealthier? I'm confused with regards to this rather simple topic. Please put this in relation to capitalism. I'm sure that communist wet dream redistribution is not the answer. No. Let me explain another thing here before we continue on. Capitalism is not a theory or an idea. It's human nature. It's law. Even in communist countries, the most dictatorial communist countries, capitalism is human nature. Like, for example, in Russia, they say, we're not going to have any American genes. Yet somehow the free market got in there. Even though the United States is quote-unquote capitalist, we have what would be considered government public sector laws against drugs. And we all know that drugs do not make it into the United States because we made a law against it. The government banned it. So no drugs get into the United States. In other words, what I like about underground economies or black markets is it shows you no matter what the government tells you, human nature, when left to its own devices, legal or not, is capitalism. People want to make a profit. That's how you live. So just a nice little side philosophy to observe that even in all the communist countries, Venezuela, I'm sure there's no secondary market for US dollars. I'm sure I'm sure everything's above board right there, right? So capitalism it's just human nature. It's programmed into your DNA. Self-survival and self-respect and taking care of oneself and profiting. That's everybody, no matter what the government happens to call itself. The best example would be communist China. Didn't know if you noticed they're kind of capitalist now. So anyway, all right, so let's talk about how does an economy grow. All right, I said before, GDP, or what really matters is the amount of stuff or services we produce, the amount of things that enhance and maintain our lives. They call it goods and services, I call it stuff and services, whatever, is the amount of stuff that we produce. But keep in mind, remember, the dollars or the currency used to measure it is merely a measuring tool. It is the utility and value we get out of a cup of ice cream or a vacation or a gallon of gas. That's really what it is. So again, the maintenance and enhancing the utility we derive from these things is what really is economic growth or standards of living. And this utility down the road is going to diverge a little bit from stuff and things and services being produced, because not today, and I don't know when, down the road it may not be the amount of stuff or things being produced. It may be the leisure. And you can when robots take over the world and we don't have to work anymore, well, we're not producing stuff. Yeah, the robots are. So what do? We get leisure. All right, and that enhances your life. All right, so as long as we understand utility, we could go on. All right, now, how economic growth occurs is one of two ways. We either produce more of it through harder work, or we produce more of it with the same amount of resources through being more efficient in technological advances. And that's how the economy grows, working harder and working smarter. So there's more stuff and more things for the same amount of people, and then GDP or income per capita goes up and our standards of living go up. Now, you may get to the point and say, well, wait a minute, wouldn't we get to a point where all our material desires would be taken care of? Like, how many vacuums does the country really need? I know some vacuums are going to break down. I know some cars are going to break down, and they need to be replaced. But wouldn't society inevitably get to the point where we wouldn't need new stuff all the time? It'd just be the occasional replacement, and wouldn't GDP go down? In a technical, yes, your GDP would go down, but there's two reasons you're probably not going to see that happen. First, never underestimate the consumption demand of your average human. I like to say Americans because we're very materialistic consumer, but I'm talking every human. I don't care if we're in a poor country, like our people. If you had the purchasing power of the United States, you'd be just as greedy as every one of us. Have you ever found people that have had enough? Really? Have you ever met anyone? Have you met girls that buy a gazillion shoes? All right, and then, I got my nice little Kia. That does just fine. I had my 89 Cutlass Supreme. There was a Chevy Caprice Classic. That did just fine. That's not enough for people. That's not enough. They got to get the Mercedes with the heated seats. And then the next, I got to get the Mercedes with the heated leather seats. In other words, I think human greed, or vanity is almost even a better word, is limitless. And entrepreneurs and capitalists will find a way to capitalize on it. Also, really, when have you ever gotten even close to having all you ever wanted? Like right now, I'm happy, I'm a minimalist. Would I like my own personal F-16 fighter plane? Yeah. But it's not going to happen. I'll never have that amount of money. So even in a theoretical world, the economy could become so efficient and robots produce, we're just producing, everyone's got their own fighter planes, and we have... whatever, lifetime supply of Lefroy Scotch. Just the highest amount. The human mind, I think, is always going to want more, because there will always be better. Oh, he's got the 35-year Scotch. Well, I want the 37-year Scotch. So it's human, in other words, human voraciousness, demand, vanity, I think, is unlimited. Now, for wiser people, we're minimalists, we're happy with what we have. But for the vast majority of people, and then, another perfect example would be brand name stuff. Like, go back to the 1800s. You think they had this fucking shit like, oh, I had Cavaricci jeans. Oh, I got Lululemon, the yoga shorts. And like, hey Jessup, hey Jebediah. Boy, that is a sure nice piece of britches you got there. Your wife sewed a nice piece of britches for you. But now it's like, yeah, you get britches, they're just the same, but it's got a fucking Chanel logo on it, and some dumb broad out in the suburbs is going to fork over $200 of her husband's money for it. So I think human demand is unlimited, which means no matter how much the economy produces, it's not going to fully satiate human demand. Now, let's say it gets to that point we satiate human demand. The other thing where I think economic growth is theoretically unlimited in potential is that there's always new things. All right? You know, in the 1980s, I think the coolest thing to have was like the metal Voltron toy or the Optimus Prime toy. Like, holy cow. And then we had, and I remember Atari 2600 was the thing, man. Well, then guess what happened? Then Nintendo came out and fuck the Atari 2600. We got to get that. And then the Super NES. And then, oh, there's you could get a personalized computer. You know, in the 50s, they're happy to get a pogo stick and a pedal bike. And now you got racing, aluminum frame, carbon fiber bikes with Shimano racing components. And you got digital readouts. And wow, I mean, my uncle, here's another example. My uncle got one of the first calculators. I don't know, remember when this was, 70s, maybe late 60s? He got one of the first ones. I think it set him back $500. That's back then. Lord knows what inflation that is now, $1,500, $2,000, I don't know, but he got one of the first. I wish he saved it. It would have been a collector's item. Now, and then like what, by the 80s, they're giving them away for free at banks, and now you got smartphones and personal computers and with which, you know, your watch has more computing power than the space shuttle did back in Saturn V rocket days. Anyway, the point is that humans will always create and come up with new things that people want, opening up completely new industries. There was the horse and buggy, then there became automobiles. And even within those industries, there will be such innovations and advancements. Like soon we're going to have the self-driving car, pray to God. But these new creations and innovations, things you couldn't even concoct or conceive of, that all of a sudden you're like, how do we get along without it? You know, cell phones. I mean, you could like, I remember dialing in. You know, like you had to go to payphones, and you know, and I hate to date myself like that, but it's true. But the innovative capability of humans, I think, will always be there, and there will always be something new to discover or improve upon, that humans will never be satiated. Right? Now, they can get satiated in certain parts and aspects of life. Like, we don't worry about food no more. We really don't. I mean, that was a big deal 200 years ago, the biggest thing that ever played. And you know, a lot of diseases have been eradicated. We don't worry about that a lot, Mike. So then where does all this extra resource and time and energies go? Well, then it starts to pursue the services or the leisure, or well, let's just say the robots take over. You will start to see more and more services, massages, waitresses. You know, compare how many waitresses and baristas are there today compared to the 1600s. How many people went out and ate? You know, very few. So you see more and more of the leisure industries, cruises, travel, stuff like that start to take hold. And you could say, well, is that going to happen in the future? It's happening now. It's happened, I mean, go back, what, the 1950s, very few people went out dining. Now, most people eat out because they have the time to do so. Mom doesn't stay home and cook no more. It takes too much time. What else? The sheer amount of wait staff, I'd say, is another thing. How many cooks, and I don't just mean wait staff, but the food service industry. How many people are employed? How many people coming out of college are employed by the food service industry? A ton compared to the 1950s. And you may not like, well, I went to college for this, I went to college for that. You got to realize how satiated and taken care of and spoiled we are that now the service industry, the leisure industry, we could say travel too, anything. Girls getting their fingers and the masseuses and their noses done and whatever else women do to their feet, I don't know. Guys golfing. I mean, you look at the amount of time, maybe not dollars, but you look at the amount of time that we spend on leisure compared to Jebediah slaving away with his ox cart drawn field plow. You see how the economy will move. The resources are going to go somewhere, and it will go into pleasuring and pleasing ourselves, which will employ people in those industries. And inevitably, I've written about this before, about robotic economics. You're not going to get rid of the human touch. And I know this is maybe a little bit esoteric of a prediction, But I predict, I call it the not slave class, the prostitute class or something. In other words, human touch, not necessarily sexual, but certainly that, but the human interaction, the human touch is going to be in more demand. Do you really want a robot serving you? No, but you'll pay a little bit extra to have a waiter or a waitress serve you. Do you really? Yeah, can a robot give you a back rub? Right, but you probably are going to want the human touch. And then inevitably, yeah, you're probably, prostitution I think would be growing as well. But what's going to end up becoming in demand is the number one thing in the world, and that is other humans' time and attention. But we're talking decades, centuries from now when the robots take over. Certainly after I'll be dead, probably after you'll be dead. But the larger point I wanted to make to you is that that's how economies grow. I don't believe there's a cap. Everyone's worried about the robots taking over. I think it's just going to shift things like it's been happening for centuries. We have more and more leisure. It's going to shift us more towards services. And you could see this in countries like China used to be agrarian within our lifetime. Now it's industrial, where we are service and digital in the United States more than our information, more than any. So China will go that way. Lord knows who will become the next producers or producing country. But you see a lot of countries, as they come out of third and second world and move on to first world, you see that evolution occurring. Larger point is that's how economies grow. Working harder, but more so working smarter, and then coming up with completely new industries, innovations, and creations that will employ completely different people. And even if it becomes roboticized, you can't put a limit on human demand. And avarice, is that the word hang on, let me check. I think that's the word I'm looking for, avarice. I know gluttony would be another thing. Avarice. Extreme greed or wealth or material gain. Avarice is the word I was looking for. So that has no limit for most people, and that will drive, like you'll have a Ferrari with, then he'll have a Ferrari 1.1 and it's got snow windshield wipers. Oh, I need that one. And you've seen it. I mean, just go to middle school and look at the vanity of the kids. Like, they can't wear the same clothes from last year. Oh my God, no, it's out of business. They're out of fashion. Okay, so there's that. Now, then you ask about this, but who's paying? Say it's another country. Doesn't Poland get poorer by buying machines from Germany? Isn't it always the same amount of wealth around and gets shifted left and right? No, it's not the same amount of wealth. Remember, wealth is the amount of stuff being produced. All right? It's not dollars, not currency. It's the amount of things and services being produced. And so if you could produce more with the same amount of resources through efficiency gain and technological advancements, or you just work harder, there is no limit, just like there's no limit for demand of humans' avarice and greed and demand and materialism. There is no limit to the amount of production that can happen in the world if we really put our minds to it. All right? And we've seen that by the pretty much non-stop economic growth throughout history. So it is not this zero-sum game that you're operating from. Isn't always the same amount of wealth around and gets shifted left and right. In other words, isn't one country's growth at another country's decline? How can the world economy grow with everybody getting wealthier? And the economy does grow and people do get wealthier. I'm confused with regards to this rather simple topic. It's not simple at all because most economists don't take the time to explain it because they themselves don't understand it. Please put this in relation to capitalism. All right, so what you're talking about is trade. And what you have to understand about trade is that trade can be mutually beneficial. I said, what do you mean about that? Well, let me go. I got 4 items here, okay? We have Swiss chocolates, we have Russian vodka, we have American fighter planes, and we have Costa Rican coffee, okay? Now, in their own respective rights, these countries produce the best of those things. Swiss make the best chocolates, typically. Russians make the best vodka, probably. Americans certainly make the best fighter planes. And Costa Rica probably has some of the world's best coffee. Now, what if we were to say, well, we're not going to import or export or trade. We're not going to do that. And we're going to have to rely upon our own. And everyone's going to have to produce something within their own country. So this means, now think about this. Russian chocolates. Does that sound good? Does that sound appetizing to you? Costa Rican fighter planes. Do you even want to risk it in one of those things? Swiss vodka. Maybe. But I thought they made, cheese and watches and chocolates. And then American coffee. Folgers. Only Lutherans and basements drink that shit. Okay? So you see the value of having different countries produce or specializing in different things. And there are certainly traits and qualities and characteristics that result in different countries making that. So, for example, weather, no doubt, and climate helps Costa Rica and a lot of the tropical countries grow great coffee, great tobacco, Russian cigars. Would you rather have a Russian cigar, or would you rather have a Nicaraguan cigar, or a Honduran cigar, or a Cuban cigar? Swiss, I don't know, they got nice bovine pastures and they make great chocolates. What can you say? The United States, for whatever reason, I would say our historical STEM-like achievement for excellence and American idealism, we come up with the greatest fighter planes. And then what was the other one? And Russia, for whatever reason, they grow a lot of potatoes and they make the greatest vodka in the world. Right? So what the point with trade is like, yeah, we could produce all of our own stuff in-house. But what if we were to specialize in things we're really good at and trade, not for dollars, you gotta understand, it's not for money. We are not trading for dollars and currencies in yen. That is not, I don't trade dollars for yen. I will trade dollars for yen to get myself a damn good Honda motorcycle. The Japanese make superb vehicles, right? But when you trade, not to get into the boring details, you give them dollars, you go to a bank, this is what you go to a broker, you go to a bank, you get yen, and then you buy the Honda motorcycle from the Honda Corporation, and then they give you the Honda, okay? So don't worry about the currency. But then Japan says, damn, we need some F-16 fighter planes. So they come over here, and they, again, the currency is only a tool. Don't think about it as a tool. It's like, we want your motorcycles, you want our fighter planes. Let's trade. And we're going to do that with currency to account for the disparity in the volume in the trading. We want Swiss chocolates. You want Costa Rican coffee. All right, let's go ahead and trade on those goods directly. The Russians want vodka, and the Cubans want Russian vodka, and the Russians want Cuban cigars, and they go ahead and trade. Now, what ends up happening, if you haven't figured it out already, is life gets markedly improved. You're not stuck eating shitty Costa Rican chocolate, although that may not be too bad. You may have great coffee, but you have shitty fighter planes, and you got lousy vodka in Costa Rica. In the United States, you got great fighter planes, but you have horrendously shitty chocolate. Hershey's, please, go fuck yourself. You got really crappy Folgers coffee, and then what else? And we got all right vodka. But now, if you're allowed to trade, hey, we're going to produce a surplus of fighter planes, and we're going to swap all that shit out for the world's best chocolate, the world's best vodka, the world's best coffee, and we're going to keep our own best fighter planes. And so that's how international trade works. And it's mutually beneficial because we are going for utility. We're going for standards of living. We are going for maintaining and enhancing the quality of our lives. That is how economic growth occurs. Right? Now, where you are correct, or your suspicions are correct, is, hey, wait a minute, what if, okay, Poland buys machines from Germany? Well, if that's all that happens, yeah, Poland is going to run a trade deficit. And what that means is it's buying more stuff from Germany than Germany is buying from it. Now, what will inevitably happen is, because there's no demand for Polish goods, let's just say nobody demands anything from Poland for whatever reason, and Poland just keeps buying machines from Germany, Germany's going to get this surplus, this trade surplus of Polish yak. I don't know what the Polish currency is. Let's just call it the Polish yak. And because I don't think they're on the euro. Well, maybe they are. Let's just keep it separate so it's a different currency. So the Polish yak, and then you give Germany. And Germany all of a sudden has all this Polish yak. And they're like, boy, we got this Polish yak. What do we buy with it? And Hans looks at Stash, or not Stash, Hans looks at Herman, and hey, look, Poland's got nothing that we want. We got all this Polish yak, and we can't spend it in Poland because we don't want Polish shit. Kielbasa. I don't want the kielbasa. So what ends up happening is, on the international currency markets, is the value of the Polish yak goes down. And Poland, to buy those same machines in Germany, has to spend more and more yak because the exchange rate went against the Polish yak and in favor of the German Deutschmark, but now it's the euro. All right? So it takes more and more yak to buy it. They say, boy, we don't want your yak. We can't do anything with it. So this is where it's rare. You're not going to see an economy where they're not importing and exporting. But the trade deficit does give you this overall ledger or account as to how much a country produces versus how much it brings in. No, I'm sorry, how much it exports versus how much it imports. How much of its goods are in demand overseas versus how much it demands from overseas in terms of imports. And that, after a while, if it gets too lopsided, will take a negative toll on the country's currency. Now, what happens then is your imports from foreign countries, because your dollar is weaker or the Polish yak is weaker, foreign goods cost more. That means you're importing inflation. All right, but you wouldn't have to think, where's this? Just prices are going to go up. Now a Japanese motorcycle is going to cost, normally they're around 12 grand, but all of a sudden now it's 30 grand. All right, and like, geez, it just went up, it doubled in price. All right, now your standards of living are going down. You are losing purchasing power, and that is how a trade imbalance gets so out of whack that it takes a negative effect and toll on your currency, and now everything overseas costs a lot more. The only thing that really would stay in check in price would be your domestically produced goods, because they're domestic costs. But anything out overseas costs a lot more. Now, you've seen this in Greece. You've seen this in Zimbabwe. Well, they've printed off and hyperinflated their currency. Venezuela, Argentina, all these countries that, well, for other reasons, but in part their trade, their currencies got weak. And now anything that was going to be exported to them or imported into them costs a lot more. And so then their standards of living go down very dramatically. And so that's how trade works. So your country has to produce something of value. Ideally, it produce something more of value, like China. They have a trade surplus. You got this extra, these currencies laying around. Okay, now what can we buy? Well, and here's something that's interesting too. Is like, okay, maybe the United States doesn't produce anything you want. This kind of happened in the late 80s. Japan was like this, and the yen was just dominating the world. And they had all these, because the yen was so powerful, it would buy so much more of the other currencies. So they had these reserves of all these other currencies, and the yen was so powerful. And they're like, well, we don't really have much to do with our yen here in Japan. We're growing pretty well. What did they do? They started buying up property all over the place. They bought golf courts in Hawaii, golf courses. They bought property all over the place. They bought businesses. China's kind of doing the same thing now. They're buying properties over in Vancouver and the west coast of the United States. They're buying up properties along Australia. They're taking investments in foreign companies. So that's how they can invest. And then now, of course, prices then went down in the case of Japan, and there was a recession and never got out of it. But that's kind of the benefit of having a trade surplus, is you have surplus monies. You have surplus purchasing power. And if you don't want to buy things, consumer goods from other countries, now you can start buying their productive assets. You can buy their investment. You can buy their real estate. You can buy their capital. You can buy their companies, their corporations. I mean, didn't Sony buy a... Who did they buy? They bought some movie studio in the United States a long time ago. Was it Columbia? But you could see this happening in past international mergers and acquisitions. Anyway, so that's it. That's how the economy grows. That's how trade works. That's the cost if you don't have a trade surplus, is your currency weakens. You import inflation, your standards of living go down because imported goods cost more, and then foreigners can start buying up your land or your companies and your productive assets in your country, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you're a mismanaged piece of shit country like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. But for sovereignty purposes, it's of a concern for other people as well. So, all right, hope that helped out. I hope we all learned a lesson about economics. Hope that's a better lesson in economics than you ever had in your macro, micro, 101, 102 college courses. And it probably is, because it's not because I'm a great economist, it's because most professors suck dick. But anyway, go to assholeconsulting.com if you've got questions. Read my books, Bachelor Pad Economics, Worthless, Curse of the High IQ, and Poor Rich's Retirement. You'll learn more about economics and investing and finance there than you will any college degree, I guarantee you. And for like 1/10,000th the price. And then just tell your family, friends, and loved ones about Asshole Consulting and make me billions of dollars. We'll see you kids later. Toodles.